Hi, everyone in the United States and around the world. Last week, Ian just told me our broadcast was seen in at least 46 countries. And I just want to do a shout out to everyone. Thank you. And thank you tonight for your patience. We have had different problems the last 3 weeks, and this one was related to a computer problem. And so I cannot thank you all enough for hanging in there with us. We are going to try very hard to work out our schedule so that we will start doing a very specific computer issue at the end of doing video editing. If I weren't doing video editing, we would not be up against this computer problem. But we're going to try to move our schedule back so that from now on, I hope, we will always be punctual at that 7:30 Mountain and all other time zone marks. But if not, I want to thank you because it's the most wonderful feeling in the world to know that the audience keeps growing when we have problems and that you hang in there with me week after week. And I just love you for it. I truly, truly do. And I want to sort of share, I guess, a prayer with all of you to the divine field to protect everyone and your families and your kids, because what is happening in India, the awful war there against a new COVID variant that is very, very dangerous, and want to protect all of you from that. And what I have learned yesterday, May 4th, came as the first warning bell here in the United States. And this was in the San Diego Union Tribune headline. San Diego County records first COVID-19 case with India variant. Scientists have labeled it B.1.167, and some are calling it a double mutant because it has several mutations that are just like the gene mutations found in South Africa, Brazil, and California. So far, it is not known if the number of mutations in the Indian variant are so many that eventually vaccines might be less effective against it, but it could very well be that this is going to increase what appears to be a need for boosters, maybe year after year with COVID. Now, the patient on this first case announced in San Diego is a woman in her 20s, and she had been in India and returned from India in late March when she was hospitalized by early April. It took 4 weeks to do the genetic sequencing that confirmed the young woman was sick from the India B.1.167 mutated variant. And that is why there was no news about her until yesterday, May 4th. Now, also reporting that the B.1.167 mutated variant has reached beyond India was yesterday's May 4th news update from CNBC. Quote, Singapore says it has detected the double mutant COVID variant from India in its community and has now tightened restrictions there. As of Monday, May 3rd, Singapore has detected 10 local cases of the Indian double mutant variant, close quote. India is being crushed with 400,000 plus new cases a day now, the largest in the world, totaling more than 21 million cases, and the death toll this day is more than 230,000. But the New York Times reports that, quote, experts say that the India death count is probably far exceeding the figures that are being given publicly, close quote. Beyond COVID, I've been receiving a lot of emails asking me what I expect to happen now in the Department of Defense's 180-day countdown about UFOs that started December 27th, 2020. Here is an excerpt from the actual 5,593-page bill entitled Advanced Aerial Threats that I reported about originally in my January 11th, 2021 Earthfiles.com news website. And I underlined in red the title, Advanced Aerial Threats. The bill directs, quote, the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense and the heads of such other agencies as the Director and Secretary jointly consider relevant, to submit a report within 180 days of the date of enactment of the Act, which was December 27, 2020, to submit to the Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees on unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as anomalous aerial vehicles, including observed airborne objects that have not been identified, close quote. 180 days from December 7th, 2020 is June 24th, 2021, next month. And the bill says the report from the Secretary of Defense and DNI, quote, shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include a classified annex, close quote. So, when this Department of Defense May 3rd, 2021 memorandum, a couple of days ago, ended up in my email yesterday from a friend, the DOD's Assistant Inspector General for Evaluations had signed this, and it is an inspector in space, intelligence, engineering, and oversight. And I read this and I was puzzled about both the content and the timing. The subject is, quote, evaluation of the Department of Defense's actions regarding the unidentified aerial phenomena, close quote. This is the Inspector General. Then in parentheses, a long project number continuing with the memorandum, quote, we plan to begin the subject evaluation in May of 2021, which is now. Quote, the objective of this evaluation is to determine the extent to which the DOD has taken actions regarding unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. We may revise the objective as the evaluation proceeds, and we will reconsider or consider suggestions from management for additional or revised objectives. Quote, we will perform the evaluation of the offices of the Secretary of Defense, military services, combatant commands, combat support agencies, defense agencies, and the military criminal investigative organizations. And we may identify additional locations during the evaluation, close quote. The rest of this Inspector General document is about confirming who the DOD Inspector General can contact at the various offices being evaluated for follow-up. Now, why is DOD announcing a formal Inspector General evaluation before the COVID bill's 180-day countdown ends on June 24th, which is next month? And is it involved with some sort, as Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso, you heard him last week talking about with Bill Burns, the internecine warfare in Washington over these issues. Is there something going on that now is adding a whole other layer of delay and confusion? And I hope not. I'm hoping that the original legislative bill is what will be the determinant of all of us hearing something that was originally requested. Well, one well-known former Department of Defense analyst is Lue Elizondo. He headed the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, also known as ATIP, from 2007 to 2012. And recently, on April 30th, Lue Elizondo was a guest on the Basement Office podcast hosted by Stephen Greenstreet for the New York Post. Their discussion began with basic questions about UFOs, UAPs. What are they? How do they work? Who is behind the wheel? Elizondo reveals UFOs have common traits that seem to defy physics and aerodynamics that he calls observables. I am going to go into detail on just 2 of 5. The first one is instantaneous acceleration, the ability to go from point A to point B and change directions rapidly. The average human being can sustain about 9 G-forces for a short period of time before we start experiencing redouts or blackouts. To put that in context with an F-16, which can perform about 17 Gs before having the wings could snap off and the plane come apart. Lue Elizondo says the UFOs, UAPs, like this, have been seen by human military doing 400, 500, 600 Gs. Humans would not survive. This is technology and phenomena that is beyond anything that human beings are making on Earth. A second observable is hypervelocity, described as Mach 5 Gs and above. Some missiles and space shuttles can reach that going up and then down, but military observers have seen radar tracks where UFOs, UAPs in dense low Earth atmosphere are doing 90-degree turns at 11,000 miles an hour. Again, impossible for humans. Lue Elizondo compares that astounding fact to the SR-71 Blackbird here that can fly at 3,200 miles an hour. But if the pilot wants to make a turn in the air, it would take about half of the state of Ohio to make the turn. Lue Elizondo also points out that, quote, there is historical radar data that goes back many decades where UFO UAPs have been clocked doing 13, 14, 15,000 miles an hour, and not just on one radar, on multiple radars, close quote. One of the ironies in the Inspector General's investigation of UFOs and UAPs is that at the very same time that this is happening now in May of 2021 comes this new book, Making Contact. It was put in worldwide release yesterday, May 4th, by the man who brought it into being, Alan Steinfeld. He is my good friend and the producer of the New Realities weekly podcast in New York City. Alan asked 12 of us who have talked with him so many times at conferences and in interviews about why don't the power brokers of planet Earth tell the truth? That we are not alone in this universe, we never have been, and that military whistleblowers and documents since World War II, like Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso's invaluable book, The Day After Roswell, in which there are descriptions of military retrievals of very advanced technologies created by advanced alien intelligences with impossible physical abilities, as Lue Elizondo also is describing. Alan asked for 11 chapters that evolve through the book from the sort of the very physical at the beginning and moving into the more mysterious realms of quantum physics and other dimensions. And one of the chapters was an unpublished manuscript by the late Dr. John Mack, Harvard psychiatrist and author of the brilliant book, Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens. So the book ranges from that voice inside of Dr. John Mack, who has passed, to the vibrant works from Whitley Strieber to JJ and Desiree Hurtak and Alan's own point of view, and one, for me, chapter 4, I have never ever before told anyone until I wrote this chapter for Making Contact about being it was in grade school and playing in the backyard and doing a flip up over a tree branch and coming down and where your head has filled with blood and you're having a lot of fun and you look at this full moon as they can be sometimes before twilight and staring at it, and I was there. I was in it. And I knew that the moon was hollow. And there was nothing that anyone could ever tell me otherwise. I went there and I came back. And that is the realm that Making Contact goes from more the nuts and bolts to the fact that when you get into making contact with other intelligences that are moving space, moving dots in time, that they are able to move frequencies, then Making Contact, the book, it takes you through all of these different levels that I personally think, and Alan and everybody in the book feels. All of you, the whole world, needs to begin interacting with what possibly making contact with telepathic advanced beings might entail, and that we truly are babies in this universe, but that we are extremely unique and powerful with souls that I think connect quantum. I think they are a quantum energy that connects with the quantum universe in ways that we have never been taught yet. And that our making contact with other intelligences, if they are friendly and neutral, in the end, it will help us begin to evolve away from racism and wars. And we need that help. And Alan feels that when you go into the inner explorations of the soul, that is very real and truly is probably the most important defining feature of the Homo sapien sapien, that you combine this with kind of the outer adventures that the mind can achieve. When we get there, we will begin to start maybe better understanding this universe. And recently, Alan and I talked about this revolutionary time where political and military forces want to push back against the truth that we are not alone in this universe, while throughout this whole world now, people young and old and in the thousands are reaching out to us to tell their encounters with non-human beings and craft, and it's real. This is real. They are real. As Alan quotes Victor Hugo in the new book, Making Contact, quote, "There is only one thing more powerful than all the armies in the world, and that is an idea whose time has come."
I feel as the government comes forward and tells people, okay, maybe there's craft here, whatever they're going to tell us, people need to have a baseline understanding of the situation. And there is no one truth, as you know, and have been working so hard to tell people. There's a multiple list of truths because it's like you always say, a 16-layer chess game.
That's right. And whatever's going to come at the end of the 180-day countdown, we are in a government that is defining the UFO UAP as advanced aerial threats. What's on the other side of the threats?
Well, you know why they call it threats. You need the word threat in order to alert Congress for money for the budget to investigate. Of course, that's a front because the government has been investigating this before the $22 million that Harry Reid got from Congress. So they put those words in, I think, for the public to scare them, to keep them in place. And maybe it is the hostile ETs that are behind the actual government secrets there. Maybe the ETs have been running the show through the government all these years. But there seems to be the glass ceiling is breaking, and I think because if you've read the New York Times, April 12, 2021, there are more mass sightings now. I'm getting more calls. Guess what? I just had a dream about ET. Something's coming down, and so they're releasing this video as if like this is new.
Yet,
this is like,
is.
We've just gotten these
And
footage
yet,
of these Tic Tacs in 2004. Of course, they probably have footage since 47 or before, 46, and thousands of hours of footage. And they're coming out like it's, this is a new phenomena. Actually, Lue Elizondo the other day was asked, is this all the footage we have, these like last 3 or 4 with the pyramid that was floating in the air? And he practically burst out laughing. He goes, no, these are the least of them, he said. He is dropping hints that the phenomena is now like quantum physics.
That's right.
And that is why we went from UFOs to UAPs. It went from object to phenomena, because phenomena includes a vaster relationship to whatever's out there. If you just call it an object, that's one thing. Phenomena is less contained and more expansive. And I think the government doesn't know how to tell us the secrets of how complex and confusing and intricate this problem is, because they don't understand it themselves. And if they say to the public, we don't understand what's going on, are we going to support a military budget to protect us from something? Not that we actually need protection, because I think if these things were going to take over, they would have done it a long time ago. Unless they have done it a long time ago, we just haven't noticed.
And Alan, we just need a government that tells us the truth. And there have been people who did work in the Eisenhower administration who did tell the truth. And I'm thinking, I have had a part 1 and part 2 at my Earthfiles YouTube channel broadcasts with Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso, who passed back in 1998. But before he passed, he had done the very valuable book, The Day After Roswell. Page 115 list about a dozen advanced different technologies that he was personally involved in trying to usher to various American corporations for back engineering extraterrestrial technologies retrieved from craft. And they include semiconductors, they include fiber optics, they include directed energy weapons. The list goes on and on. He was telling the truth in The Day After Roswell in 1997. And it is about the life that he was leading between 1961 to 1963, when Eisenhower was president and Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso worked for the first chief of science and research development in the Army, General Arthur Trudeau. That means that we have had at least one slice of the United States government where they were trying to honestly get the retrieval of technologies into corporations, get them patented, to keep them out of the hands of perceived human enemies. And that before he died, Lieutenant Colonel Corso wrote that book, The Day After Roswell, and he put in as much as I think he felt that he could possibly do about technology and animal mutilations and human abductions and all of it. So why, if he could do that in 1997, why can't the current government of the United States tell us everything in 2021?
Well, why don't we pay attention to just what we've been told back then? Why is that not required reading for the Congress themselves? But even going back to ATIP and the ATIP papers that were written for the government between 2007 and 2012, there's that Eric Davis paper about wormholes through space. I mean, there's all these anti-gravity papers. There's a lot of information. You know, the secret documents that were smuggled out of the ATIP program, those 7 slides that Christopher Mellon brought out, along with the videotapes, talk all about those top secret government papers that were developed about time travel, about space warps. I mean, why isn't the public more aware of that? But why aren't reporters, besides you, Linda, talking about this? Who is stopping them? And what is it, their own ignorance? Is it their own inability to stretch beyond their limitations?
People get afraid of being ridiculed. They get afraid that they're going to overstep some kind of perceived boundary in society, that if they do, they will lose their career, they will lose prestige just by simply investigating the truth of other intelligence in the universe. People are ready to move on to new ground because something inside of them, which I think is their soul, is pushing. There is something pushing the fabric of Homo sapien sapien. And it is encouraging because right now, I'm sure you feel it. This is a revolutionary moment between the pandemic and what is going on with trying to get us to Mars with information that may have to do with an existential future. And we humans with our quantum souls, we have got to move on to stronger ground of knowing more truth. I personally think it could help us survive.
And I think the veils between the dimensions is becoming thinner, so more people are having out-of-body experience, so awakening to telepathic contact. Something's going on with the whole species, and maybe whatever's happening, this inside government's aware of it, and they're trying to keep one step ahead of everyone, but they're not doing it. This movement is moving faster than the government can keep it contained, and I think something's about to show itself, but not just these little videos that are, 10 or 20 years. Something's about to break loose.
Alan, what you're saying and what I am feeling, we are ready now for the mind crack that we're not alone in this universe.
Yes, something is real, and it's not officially sanctioned. And that's sort of what's great and what's awful about the era of the internet, that we can find people out there to confirm our experiences so it doesn't have to go through, you remember the 3 news channels that most of us were brought up with, and if it wasn't there, it wasn't real. But now the spread of information is encouraging more and more of us to come forward and share our experiences. And that's what I love about your work, Linda, and you're pushing for the truth. And if we can all get caught up, this is one way to do it. Read through the chapters in this, Making Contact, and understand the scope and the complexity of this situation. Then you'll be ready to hear Linda's understanding of the next level of complexity.
Yeah. It's wonderful that the audience keeps growing. And what happens on May 4th?
The official release of the book. Go to Amazon and put your order in for Making Contact, and they'll send it to you right away. So on May 4th, this is released to the public worldwide. So this is a time, it may not be the mind-cracking headline that you wanted, Linda, but it's another crack in the ceiling of denial.
Yes, I agree, and thank you, Alan Steinfeld, for bringing us all together into Making Contact. And I would like to share with you a couple of really, I think, important paragraphs from the book, Making Contact. And in this case, it's the voice of Whitley Strieber. It's on page 138. Inside of each of us has a chapter. And this is really, I think, important. This is a time for a new conversation with the visitors to begin. He calls them visitors. The challenge goes both ways. They have to take the risk that we will not be able to bear their presence. And we have to take the risk that they might be dangerous to us in irrecoverable ways. It's not without risk. And then he closes with these words. We know that there are trillions of stars in trillions of galaxies, and that this is probably only one of an effective infinity of universes, which is the point of view of Roger Penrose that I interviewed about that 2 or 3 years ago. And if it is an infinity of universes, which all probably have an infinity of mirror universes, breathing neutrons back and forth between their realities like great enigmatic hearts. And then there is this band here on this speck of dust, touched with intelligence and struggling to find our magic as well and sail through infinity on the coattails of a wandering star. And between those 2 paragraphs and hundreds of others rich, I hope you all get making contact, because we humans can't be weighed down anymore by inspector generals and offices that want to keep pushing back, discussing the truth that is fundamental to our relationship to each other in this universe. So thank you for being here and being patient. And Ian, what about questions? I will try to go the balance of what we would have had in an hour.
Okay, thank you, Linda. First of all, I'll say thank you to our audience, first of all, for the patience while we had the computer problem. But also, thank you very much for those who've contributed in the super chat this evening. I'll go through the list of names as best as I can here. Moonbird, Dave Goodridge, Bob Thorson, Minnesota Folk, Matt Moffat, Ron Schooler, Tamara Terry, Fernando Menezes, Christina Chocos, Mark Petty, Caroline Boyce, Stan Koswolski, Jareen Broker, Bob Regal, Glincho, Peace Party, Kendall 10090, Sexy Sadie, Jareen Broker, Barber 0611, and Wendy Lemons.
I just can't thank you enough. All of your participation in being here. It means everything and helps us keep doing this. And our numbers keep growing. We are so close to ticking over 173,000. And we've got the summer solstice that will be coming up in June, the end of June or middle of June. So, and I want to have Eric and Ian prepare for next week. We'll have a whole thing about what you guys can do to get videos to us with questions for me, and it will be fun. And it's just a great feeling that we are expanding in countries, and I'm hearing from you all over the world. And hopefully we can get on top of our computer problems and our schedule so you don't have to be delayed at all anymore. And thank you for your patience, and onward into more questions.
Okay, Linda, here we go. First of all, the speculation about the UFOs and the USOs. These have been seen by the US Navy on, I think, the east and the west coast of the United States. Linda, do you think that alien USOs, underwater submersible objects, and underwater bases are prevalent? And also, do you think that they are also off the west coast and the east coast of the United States?
I think they are throughout this planet. New scientific papers are talking about the discovery of more and more large spaces within this Earth. And I personally feel that one of the single most important discussions of my entire life was that meeting in December of 1999 with the Defense Intelligence Agency analyst, the meeting that took a month to set up. And when we got together, The first thing that he did was say that our government knew that there had been 3 competing extraterrestrial civilizations using Earth as a laboratory. And one of the things that he told me in that long discussion that I haven't gone into a lot here, it's complex and I don't fully comprehend it all myself, but he was talking about how the advanced intelligences approaching any planetary system, whether it was going to be a moon, a planet, whatever it was, they are doing analytics on everything that is in that body. And he said it is a sort of a spherical geometry analysis, and they will know what the core is like, they will know where big spaces are, all of that. And that's when he went into the 3 types, the tall blondes, the reptilian humanoids, and the gray menageries, of which so much of them are artificial intelligence. And he broke down our planet of that, where they like to inhabit this planet when they are based here, and said the grays like to be in mountains, like the Himalayas and Mount Shasta and all over, that the standing up reptilians like to be in warmer desert areas, and that they are the dominant intelligence in Mesopotamia, and that the tall blondes always have gone down into oceans, lakes. They go down through the bottoms. They're not on the bottom under the water. They go through the bottom basins to go into cavernous areas that they have detected with their technologies. And so they are based inside of our planet. And that is really consistent, actually, in many ways, with what some people in the abduction syndrome have also understood, depending upon who they were with in any given abduction. The sense that we are not dealing with species that are moving light years or with every sighting. They're based here in our Earth, in the mountains, in huge caverns that are beneath the basins of the oceans and the seas and the deserts. So if you just take that as, say, this is sort of like opening square one in how we live on a planet that can be a laboratory, and we are surface life that has been made by the manipulation of DNA and already evolving species that were primates, and that there have been so many different models, and we are the current one dominating the surface. But the humbling sentence is, we are not the dominant intelligent life form in Earth or this solar system. And that's why that paragraph from Whitley Strieber, I think, is we need to begin some completely different, richer dialogue with advanced intelligences, even if it's telepathic, to move ourselves on. And that eventually, if we are to move out into bases on Mars, we're going to be underground on Mars. It would be a real challenge to have anything on the surface of Mars with those huge red dust storms that come up and completely obliterate everything periodically. And this is like we are beginning, in a kind of evolutionary way, we are beginning to understand our solar system and the Milky Way galaxy and the universe and mirror universes and all of the complexities now through science reports. We're not having to go out into the universe yet to explore that. We're doing it currently through scientists and instruments from Earth that are opening up minds in every direction about what if we are in a holographic universe? What if all of this is a projection of light? What if in the Nag Hammadi, where it talks about the thought that dwells in the light is all that there is. Right now, this revolution, if we come out without violence, if we come out without atomic war, it may be that getting into the second half of the century and the century beyond would be finally joining with advanced intelligences and learning how to communicate with the thought that dwells in the light and communicating with it every day as a life form that recognizes and seeks nourishment and strength from the universe, in which all that really is comes down to photons. So I find this exciting, even though I know that there's danger as we evolve. But if we all learn and keep evolving together, and we don't dissolve into fractious national territory war, we could turn this century away from pandemics and everything else, and maybe, Alan and I were talking about it, maybe it would be a renaissance, that out of all of this darkness, we could evolve into a renaissance with real non-humans. All right, what about another question?
Okay, well, it's still on the subject of USOs. We've got a comment in the chat, and I'll read it to you as it's been posted here. I have a friend who was a nuclear sonar man, and he tracked a large metal object in the Pacific that was going faster than anything we have or the Russians have. This was back in the 1970s.
I wouldn't doubt it at all. And I'm sure that our government and other governments have huge, huge archives, underground, in mountains, about a lot of these kinds of reports and follow-up and the science of it. But we do not, at this point, we as a human family, we are not being allowed to understand all the details. And I suppose the argument that you would hear most dominant in Washington would be because if China, Russia, and the United States want to weaponize ET technology that has been retrieved from the variety of crashes, which may have been like Trojan horses. I remember one time a man who had worked at Area 51 told me that he had become convinced that some of the so-called crashes on this planet were probably on purpose to safely, meaning that if it's a crash and the beings that are AI are not functioning or are dead, quote unquote, then we can approach and we can retrieve whatever is left of the craft. And it is in that back engineering that humans would then feel safe. They wouldn't be in the threat of being face to face with non-humans that they didn't understand. And that this could have been a historic device to place advanced technology, some of which we could back engineer, but some of it which, as I understand it, at least there was an interview recently when we were talking about with Colonel Corso, and Colonel Corso was saying that probably 95% of what had been retrieved still had not been understood or back engineered. So we are babies in many ways, but getting to the actual reports, the actual physics, all of it, I suppose the government says, well, our general audience, they're not educated to understand these reports anyway. And it's safer to keep them from our enemies, and we keep living in this strange state of the human family being kept at an arm's length distance from all of the rich and deep and profound and challenging and potentially difficult, potentially not difficult, potentially uplifting, maybe, relationships with other intelligences who know the universe because they travel in it by moving space. And to get to that point, if we are the students and they are the teachers, and we could communicate, wow, I think that would be wonderful, not something to avoid. So, okay, Ian, what about another?
Linda, here's one. I'll read it to you. I have a few questions. Have the individuals of abduction ever stated if the aliens that were malevolent said anything about their history on this planet? I'll give you the other brief sections to this question as well. Have they ever confirmed they were working with our government, and why? And have they ever stated their true intent for humans?
Those are good and relevant questions, and I would direct everybody listening and everybody you know to my Glimpses Volume 2, in which I have a whole chapter segment about the communication I had in 1993 to 94 with a man who worked for the NSA and another who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency through my good friend and colleague, Ray Boucher, who is a minister in Lincoln, Nebraska. And he had been writing papers on eschatology, essentially the end of the world. And he was approached by the NSA DIA on that work. My second book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, had come out in the end of 1993, so it was sort of 93, 94, crossing the new year. And they asked him, they wanted a copy of my book, and they were working with him on eschatology, and they asked Ray Boucher, could he ask me to get a book? And I said to Ray, as I write about in the book, not only am I happy to give them a book, I'm happy to give you 2 books. You can give one to them, and if they would just write on the margins everything, anything telling me what's right, what's not right, what they know, just to use my entire book and write in the margin, do notebooks, send it back to me, and keep the other clean, pristine book. And they communicated, thank you, they got my book. And in Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, that came out in 1998, is the whole exchange that went on with these men and with Ray for 2 years almost, and they communicated on a floppy disk, and the floppy disk would go to Ray in an envelope, and Ray would then send to me. And I printed out everything in Glimpses Volume 2 that they told me. And it boiled down to a perception of at least the non-humans that they were discussing with Ray Boucher, that they were deceptive and that they could not be trusted, and that what they told the government, essentially, they were doing the opposite. Now, that is not the only communication that I've had about the non-humans having one presentation while they are actually after X, Y, and Z and not leveling with humans, and being telepathic and using the language centers of the human minds to communicate telepathy. It raises the question, how do we ever get a reality check on anything? A benign deception could be a dangerous lie. But swinging to the other side, that there aren't just one. There are not just one type of being with one type of intent. I have no doubt about that. Everybody that I've ever talked to who had any information at all from work in military or intel, they would say it's complex. They would say it is like a chess game. You can't tell the players without technology. That the human body form is used as camouflage. I completely believe that from my big 106 page chapter in Glimpses Volume 2, that the abductees are introduced to seeing their own body in a tube that is kept alive by some form of light technology. And the beings in that particular case say, you do not understand. It is important that the soul be within a certain container for a certain length of time. That time is a factor, and that they must somehow keep humans that might die of disease or die in an accident, that they must use cloning to keep that soul for a very specific period of time. Well, that's what the dialogue is between the abductees and the non-humans. Well, the other layer, another layer in the chess game is, what if the cloning is not because the soul needs to be in the human body or another body for a certain length of time? What if the reality is that they can clone because they need bodies to interact on Earth? That's why I've always called it a 16-layered chess game that Alan and I laugh about, but it's very true. And I'm not afraid of it, because I think that one of the more powerful statements that Alan and I talked about in the interview tonight is when he sort of laughed, but it's true. What if aliens had taken over the planet and they are the ones that are running everything? They're the ones who are the power brokers behind the scenes, but we don't know, and we've never been told. All the way to the end of that particular hypothesis being that it's a very complex laboratory that is also a school, and that in the laboratory, competing extraterrestrial civilizations have used this planet for millions of years to mix and match genes and to make all sorts of life forms, including us, but that at the same time, they are interested in what we are. They are interested in the power of our soul, which I am convinced is a true diamond of the human life. And that no one that I know, and that's going back to the or to the question circling back that was originally asked. I don't know or have a memory of any abductee ever saying that they were convinced that they were dealing with pure evil if it was a case that was studied and there was hypnosis and retrieval of memory. That's the context in which I'm putting this. That all of the abductions, there are people who have described being terrified and paralyzed, but after a while they began to feel like, oh, maybe the non-humans were actually trying to help them, even while they might be harvesting sperm, might be harvesting eggs for something that is going on in relationship to the other life forms that we still don't fully understand. Now, there were definitely cycles in the early 1980s into the late 1980s when Missing Time came out, my documentary A Strange Harvest about the animal mutilations. The animal mutilations on this planet are a huge part of one or more alien presences. And is it a collection to use the genetic material in more sophisticated ways? Is it reptilian harvesting of sustenance, or both? And do the animal mutilations lead to something that we still don't even know anything about? So when you get into these questions, which should be being asked around the world now, there are my books, there are Kathleen Marden's books, there's Colonel Corso's book, there's Stanton Friedman's books, there's Whitley Strieber's books. The books that really, really can help get into these very understandable questions. I don't think that they have reached and penetrated the huge audience of the world yet, because since World War II, the whole question of UFOs, as I've said before, is when Sanford in Washington, D.C., after the flyover of the UFOs of the nation's capital, he was, I guess, cynical or desperate or both, and called together the reporters and a press conference. And he literally had a physical hubcap from a car and has the TV cameras run and takes the hubcap from the car and throws it up into the air that was caught by the cameras and says, "There's your UFO." And behind his cynical, "I'm going to get rid of everybody today, nobody's going to get me into a dialogue," was that what flew over Washington, D.C. in that 1952 time period clearly was something that we got on radar, and it was not identifiable, and Sanford used the hubcap to try in one fell swoop be so sarcastic that a whole swath of population wouldn't take it seriously. That's what he wanted to accomplish. And we've been through so many episodes like that that now it's like Whitley said, we need a whole new beginning conversation of what is really in this universe, who is really interacting with this planet, who is based on this planet with us. And I hope we will continue to get more and more answers as we continue to gather for the Earthfiles YouTube channel each week. And I guess I just want to embrace you and say by next week, we will have a whole new subject to go into, and that I'm just so happy that we are so close. We're going to, if you help me tonight, we'll go over 173,000, and we will announce how we want to do the videos next Wednesday for sure. And Brad and I and all of us, we are going to try to back time, so hopefully we will never be late again, but we can't promise it. And what you proved to me tonight is you are so kind, you are so patient with my imperfections, and I love you so much for it. I wish we could all love each other all the time in agape love, our imperfections and the parts of us that are a wonder to other intelligences who watch us. See you next week.
Turn on closed captions for YouTube videos by clicking the white CC button on the lower right. The default language for Linda's videos is English. If you would like to see the captions in another language, click on the white settings button next to the CC button. Select Subtitles CC, and then select Auto Translate. Select a language, and the captions will now appear in that language.
Sort of gone through, and they will hold their heads. I never had a cat do that before. And they'll pull against the comb, helping me get out snarls. and I think it's the best they've ever been.